Alrighty, so I believe this is now match week number 14 or 15. That is, I'm starting to lose count because there's been just a lot of games that has happened in May. I mean, a lot of teams are basically being tested at the brink in terms of the depth because of how many games that each of these teams play, and especially for teams that are still participating in the U.S. Open Cup. Yeah, it's almost like every day these teams are basically playing free games in days, and that, yeah, there are going to be a couple of teams that once again are going through that. And it also doesn't help the fact that the very next week they're going to also be doing the same thing as well, as we will have a midweek action that is going to come up as well. But with that being said, let us begin by talking about the matinee game first in this preview. And really, the format is usually the same for this week as well. You have the two Saturday matinee game, then you got the meat of the action in the Saturday night game, and then you have the two Sunday game, including Sunday night soccer. But what's kind of interesting is that these two Saturday matinee games are West Coast games, starting with the lunchtime kickoff between Seattle and FC Dallas that will start at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific, and this has got to be brutal if you're a Dallas fan. I think Dallas, if I'm not mistaken, they played on Wednesday, and they had to go to extra time in that one, and even go to a PK shootout, and all of that. They lost that PK shootout. So not only the fact that they suffer the loss of a PK shootout, now they have to travel all the way across the other side of the country on a short rest, on an early kickoff to face against a team that they do not have a lot of success when they're playing at Lumen Field. So yeah, the Sounders have a 5-5-4 record, whereas Dallas have a 4-4-5 record. In terms of the head-to-head meeting, heavily in favor of Seattle. 21-11 in favor of the Seattle Sounders. But if there's one thing I will say about Dallas this season, they have definitely played much better on the road compared to them playing at home. But this is going to be a tough task for Peter Quote side. And usually when you have a team that have to play across the other side of the country on a short rest, especially when you have a midweek game that is in the Open Cup and you play 120 minutes plus the PK shot and travel across the other side of the country to play a game, that is gonna be really tough in terms of the fitness on this Dallas team. They probably have the worst out of any team when it comes to playing in the U.S. Open Cup in the middle of the week, and there's no doubt that Seattle's gonna have to try to capitalize on that one. This one definitely looked like could be a victory for the Sounders, but I'm not gonna guarantee them a win, because anytime when I guarantee a win for a team, you know how that ends up. Now, moving on, we got San Diego versus LA Galaxy. So this is, of course, a rematch match of the first ever meeting between both of these teams. Turns out to be a historic event, not only for San Diego fans seeing their first ever match in MLS history, but also captivated by their first ever win in their MLS history. Now, I don't think they imagined the fact that the Galaxy would be still winless up to this point. And I'm pretty sure Galaxy fans are probably not envisioned them being winless now this season. It's now almost half a season that they've gone winless. 0-4-10 is their record, whereas San Diego is 7-3-4, as this game starts at 4:45 p.m. Eastern, 1:45 p.m. Pacific. So you know what that means. It's going to be on the Fox network. And as I mentioned, the only meeting that we saw between both of these teams was a historic one. San Diego was able to get the win. Now, that being said, the Galaxy does come up of a it's not a win for them. They drew against LAFC, but it absolutely felt like a win in that out traffic game, and maybe that might be a spark for them to get out of this hole that they're in. And it's not going to be easy facing against a San Diego team that seems like they're picking themselves back in form after they kind of had their little struggle in near the end of April and into May. So yeah, who knows if this might be finally the day that the winless run comes to an end. And certainly, if you're San Diego, you definitely don't want to be that team to be the first one to hand the Galaxy their first win. I mean, I know eventually the Galaxy are gonna get their first win. I don't think they're going to go the entire season winless. I mean, surely they can't go the entire season winless. The Galaxy, that is. But you also don't want to be the opposition to hand them the first win of the season, because not only me Monday will on the MLS Redder page will be all targeted toward that team handed the Galaxy their first win, but yeah, you just don't want to do so, especially when you have a team that is now 14 games without a win to start the season. Now we move on into the 7:30 start, and there's a lot of 7:30 games. Six of them that's going to be happening at 7:30. Starting off with the first one, which is Toronto versus Nashville SC. So Toronto have a 3-4-7 record, whereas Nashville have a 7-3-4 record. Nashville, of course, they must be feeling it these last couple of weeks. I mean, this has been one of the hotter team in the Eastern Conference, and that even went into the U.S. Open Cup, knocking out Orlando City on the road and coming into this game with a lot of confidence with 7-3-4 record. Whereas for TFC, yeah, it's been a struggle this season, and the fact that they're not the worst team in the league, I think if you're a TFC fans, you'll be very happy about that. But that being said, I said it's a struggle, but they did win 6-1 against Montreal. I mean, let's not of course look at how bad Montreal is also this season, but yeah, that's gotta be an achievement for TFC to able to beat their big rival by emphatic and a historic scoreline like this. Now that being said, as much as they got a big victory like that, will there be a letdown heading into this game, especially when you're facing against a much stronger team? We'll see how this game's going to turn out. Now, moving on, we have Philly versus Inter Miami, and as I mentioned before in that video, I talked about Inter Miami a couple of days ago and what has went wrong with this team. Well, yeah, if they want to snap out of this bad run of form, this is probably the last team they want to face because the Union, after losing their first game against Inter Miami early this season, they're licking their chop for some revenge in this one, especially against a struggling Miami side. But the Union have a 9-2-3 record. Miami has a 6-4-3 record. Head to meeting 6-2-4 in favor of Inter Miami. But like I said, this is a Union team that is right now at the top of the Eastern Conference, actually tied with Columbus at the top of the Eastern Conference, but they have the better wins. That's why they're at the top, and they're actually at the top of the standings as well in the Supporter Shield standings because Vancouver has kind of stumbled a little bit in terms of dropping points. That kind of got them to the, first place in not only the East but overall in the standings. And like I said, they're licking their chop against a Miami side that, like I said, this is a side that not only have been in a really bad run of form, they just cannot keep the ball out of the net. 20 goals that they have conceded in the last 7 games. That is insane amount of goals to concede. That's like almost free every single game. And when you have that kind of record, it's no wonder why they have lost 5 of their last 7 games in all competition. Now, moving on, we got Orlando versus the Portland Timbers. So Orlando 6-6-2, whereas the Timbers is 6-5-3, and both of these teams, of course, coming off of some tough losses in the U.S. Open Cup. For Orlando, of course, losing to Nashville at home, whereas the Portland Timbers, yeah, they're gonna have the FC Dallas treatment, playing over 120 minutes, getting the loss, and now have to go all the way across the other side of the country on a short week to place against an Orlando side that you know that they're going to be angry coming into this game after losing in the U.S. Open Cup. But in terms of head-to-head meeting, 3-2-2 in favor of Orlando City, and mind you, Orlando City has been really good this season at home. At home this season, for the most part, they have been pretty much unstoppable, especially on the attacking front. And this is also a Timber side that has problem in terms of keeping the ball out of the net, and also, their attack has also at times generate. So maybe this could be a high-scoring game. You could say that could happen, or the fact that Orlando City is going to absolutely pounce on the Timbers in this one, because like I said, this team, they're probably very upset after losing to Nashville in the U.S. Open Cup. Not saying that the Timbers are not upset as well, but I just think that the fact that, with them have to travel across the other side of the country, and not to mention they play a lot of their starters in that game against the Quakes, you wonder how the fatigue factor is going to be in this game against Orlando City. Now we got another interconference matchup between Montreal and LAFC, an interconference matchup that's hard to believe it's only the third ever meeting between LAFC and Montreal. These are two teams that don't face against each other very often. But Montreal 1-4-9, and yeah, it was definitely a week to forget for Montreal. Not only losing 6-1 to Toronto in the Canadian Classique, but also losing in the Canadian Championship as well to Forge FC in the first leg, and now they have to face against an LAFC side that, if there's one thing about LAFC this season, the road has not been kind to LAFC this season. They have struggled this season on the road. Only one win so far on the road this season, and it's the reason why they're not higher up in the standings as they usually are with a 6-4-4 record. But in terms of the head-to-head meeting, 2-0-0 in favor of LAFC. So basically, LAFC has won both of the meeting, and they'll look at the gun to try to make it get free 0-0 against this Montreal team that basically has no confidence whatsoever. I mean, it's one thing to lose 6-1 to your rival, but then you follow that up by losing a lower division team in the Canadian Championship. I mean, I know Forge FC is definitely a powerhouse in the Canadian Premier League, but you know that MLS team should do well against the Canadian Premier League side, no matter how bad they are. And yeah, for Montreal, this is going to be a tough one to try to overcome. Now, moving on, we got the Atlantic Cup between DC and the New York Red Bulls. So DC 3-5-6, whereas the Red Bulls is 5-3-6. Now, in terms of the head-to-head meeting, 22-13-11 in favor of the New York Red Bulls. But keep in mind, DC did win the first ever Atlantic Cup meeting this season, and actually shocking the Red Bulls as well, because DC was not playing very well doing that coming into that game in terms of their form. And yet they caused an upset. So again, this is kind of a game where you're kind of thinking that, well, in terms of the form itself, you would think that maybe the Red Bulls once again gets the advantage, because DC, they've been a little bit mediocre. But that being said, the Red Bulls are also playing on the road. They've been very bad this season on the road, so don't be surprised. Maybe DC can capitalize. I mean, I say that, but DC hasn't been good at home either. So again, it's just kind of feel like it's one of those matchup where something has to give. Is it going to be the poor home form for DC that will show, or is it going to be the bad road form of the Red Bulls are going to show? Either way, this should be a very important Atlantic Cup, and especially for the Red Bulls after getting embarrassed in the New York Derby in that game. They definitely are looking to trying to get back on the winning ways in terms of a rivalry game. They definitely do not want to suffer back-to-back rivalry losses in terms of the match week in the last two games. Now, moving on, we're gonna finish off with the last game that starts at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, and that, of course, is Charlotte versus Columbus. So remember a couple of weeks ago when we talked about this was a matchup that could be a preview of the Eastern Conference Final, especially of how good both of these teams was. Yeah, one team are still doing relatively well in the standing in second place, but one team just completely fall off the map. And really, I think that was the game where Charlotte has, it was kind of almost like the beginning of the end for this team when it comes to just them completely fall off the map, because ever since that game, I think they went. That's the game that kind of sparked this 5-game losing streak. And if you include U.S. Open Cup, that's now 6 games that they have lost in a row. And this is a team that, for a Charlotte team, you look at this losing run that they have had. It's not the goal scoring that has been a problem of this team. It's the defense that has been a huge issue and a huge red flag of the reason why they're on this losing run. And that it's got to be concerned, because Dean Smith's side usually are really good defensively, but these last couple of games, my goodness, I mean, to give up 3 goals in the middle of the week, yes, I know they didn't play most of their starters in the game against DC, but that's inexcusable, and that's on top of some of the other games that they've just conceded goals at will. Something, again, you just don't see that happen with the Charlotte team last season. This team was the best defensive team in the league last season, and now they have. It doesn't help the fact that they have to play against Columbus, and this is also not to mention a rare home game as well. Charlotte is going to be on the road for a lot of their remaining game, and this is a rare home games that they're going to have doing the stretch. And it doesn't help that the rare home game that they have is against one of the best team in the East, in the Columbus Crew. But in terms of head-to-head, 2-3-2 in favor of well, actually 2-3-2 is the record. That is, both teams have 2 wins and free draws apiece. And yeah, again, for this Charlotte team, they desperately need a win. I mean, this as long as this losing run continue, it doesn't feel like they're gonna be able to snap out of it until they finally get their first win. And you just kind of had a sense that this maybe could be the game to do so, but it's not gonna be easy, because like I said, Columbus this season, they've only lost once this season, and that one loss that they have, they probably should have got a result or even get a win against Inter for Miami. So this is not an easy team to beat whatsoever, and definitely not an easy team to stop the bleeding that the Charlotte team is enduring. I mean, it's hard to believe that just a couple of weeks ago, and maybe about a month and a half, this team was in first place in the Eastern Conference. They're now sitting in 8th place, and are in the playing round, and are in danger of falling out of the standings. I mean, that is a complete collapse that we have seen the team gone through. That's something you just don't usually see happen with teams that are playing so well in the standings and just completely fall off the map. Now, moving on in terms of the next match, and now talk about the 8:30 p.m. / late West Coast game. And I say that of course is the case. Minnesota kind of had something similar to that last season as well, where Minnesota was doing very well in the standings, up in the standing as well. And then the June month happened, and when all the players were gone because of international duty, things just completely they take a turn for its worst. Now, I'm hoping that's not going to be the case again for this Minnesota team, even though they're going to once again have to deal with the international break pain. Although it's not going to be as bad as last season. At least they're going to have some breaks in between of the Gold Cup. But there's no doubt that this is going to be a shorthand, the Loons team. And I can understand why maybe Eric Ramsey decided to put some of his reserve to just kind of test things out. And so far, the reserve hasn't really been optimal in terms of this team. Now, that being said, I also think that this is probably the last game that Minnesota will play where they're going to be playing against an opponent that they should get 3 points in Austin FC, because when I look at the Minnesota schedule ahead of them, they got Vancouver in the middle of the week, and then they have to play Seattle the following day. Yeah, that is that's definitely not easy, especially those are you have one team that is at first place in the Western Conference, and then you have another team that Minnesota just cannot beat them because Seattle absolutely owned Minnesota all this year. And then to follow that, they have to play against San Diego FC at home, and we know how good San Diego has been this season as well. So this is going to be a brutal 3 game stretch. The Loons are going to endure, and then after that, they have to play against Houston at home, a team that already beat them once this year. Now, coming into this game, Austin have a 5-3-6 record. In terms of the head-to-head meeting, 5 wins apiece for both of these teams. Now, the first meeting between these teams, Minnesota was able to win on the road, and Austin is looking to try to replicate that, especially in the U.S. Open Cup game that they play against Houston. That was probably the best performance that they played the whole season, and not to mention what's important of that game is the fact that they got Brandon Vasquez and Usman Bakari on the score sheet. Those are guys that they really hope to get on score sheet to get things going, because with how bad this attack has been under Nico Estevez, yeah, they need some sort of spark, and maybe that could do so against this Minnesota team that at times they have played down to their competition. At times that I've seen this team have struggled when they play against weaker opponent. I think that game against St. Louis was a good example in the U.S. Open Cup. Yes, I know they win that one. Thankfully, Anthony Markanic in terms of having his vendetta game against St. Louis in that one. But if it wasn't for that, they would have lost that game, and that would have been embarrassing loss considered. Even with a reserve team, Minnesota should be better than St. Louis. I mean, this is the team that you just beat a couple of days ago, and I know it's tough to beat a team twice in a season, let alone in a span of 3 days. But yeah, that was almost an embarrassing result, and I'm really hoping Minnesota will take Austin seriously in this one, especially like I said, the schedule is going to get tougher for this Minnesota team. And before they do go for a stretch where that is a stretch where it can really determine whether they are indeed contender in the West right now, and maybe send a message to the rest of the Western Conference and maybe even the rest of the league that Minnesota is definitely a contender in MLS. They had to take care of business in this game against Austin, and also I would say not fall into the trap as well, because it's easy to look forward to some of those tough games and not realize that yeah, you got to take care of your business against a team that have not been really good this season in terms of their recent form in league play. Now, moving on, we got Sporting KC versus the New England Revolution. So these are two teams that, got off to a terrible start to the season. And in some way, both of these teams have kind of started to play a little bit better. I mean, I say for Sporting KC, it's been kind of a slow burn. I mean, they got to a point where they were incredibly bad under the last couple of games in the end of the Peter Vermes era to getting a little bit better after the Peter Vermes era, but still kind of mediocre and probably not enough where I could say that they get themselves back into the playoff race. What they're facing against a New England team is definitely back in the playoff race. I mean, Caleb Porter has definitely worked from dark magic to a point where somehow he's galvanized this team to go on a decent run of form. Though that being said, they did lose in the U.S. Open Cup in the middle of the week, and they have a 5-3-4 record coming into this game. Now, in terms of head-to-head meeting, 10-4-7 in favor of New England. By the way, both of these games on 8:30 p.m. Eastern start. That is, if I haven't mentioned. And yeah, this is a game that should be very interesting. I also won't be surprised it could be low scoring as well. Both of these teams are not known to score goals, and especially with kind of like they're revitalized with both of these teams after getting off to slow start. It hasn't been because of pretty soccer. It's been they've been keeping the score lows. They might not play the most brilliant brand of soccer you can imagine, but it's effective soccer to get them points, and that's all that matters when you're not doing very well and you got off to a terrible start to the season. As long as you're getting points so total, it doesn't matter how you play. I think fans are going to be happy about that, especially after suffering through a tough stretch to start the season, as both of these fan base have to endure. Now, moving on, speaking of a team that have been suffering a tough season, that of course is Real Salt Lake. I mean, it's been a pretty mediocre slash terrible season that RSL has endured, and it doesn't help the fact that they have to face against the best team in the West. That is the Vancouver Whitecaps. Now, I will say this: Vancouver has definitely come back down to earth a little bit in the last couple of games. They're not getting wins and not being like a wagon as what we have seen before. And you kind of sense maybe this is kind of just a sign of fatigue, maybe start to kick in on this Vancouver side. Though that being said, I also wonder, whether or not if they maybe are just kind of not wasting too much energy because they got a big important game coming up on June 1st. Is the CONCACAF Champions Cup final on June 1st? Actually, let me just do a quick research here because I want to make sure that if I'm not mistaken, the CONCACAF Champions Cup final is on June 1st. Yeah, it's on June 1st. So what I said about Minnesota having a tough game against Vancouver, they actually might luck out in that game. And especially I'm kind of surprised that game wasn't postponed either because I think last year didn't MLS kind of give a break to Columbus, the fact that they had their midweek game canceled because they're preparing for the CONCACAF Champions Cup final. And then we also saw that with LAFC as well when they made it to the finals. So yeah, kind of interesting that they didn't give it to Vancouver, and it's kind of a little tough break for Vancouver not to do so because when you have such a big game, like that CONCACAF Champions Cup final, that could be not just a big game for your season, but just a cup defining game. I mean, if they win that one, they join the Seattle Sounders as the only two teams to win the CONCACAF Champions Cup and get themselves up the mountain. But yeah, there's no doubt that they might rest some of their guys, and maybe Minnesota gets a little bit lucky of that. But before that, they have to focus on facing against Real Salt Lake, a team that, like I said, have not done very well this season. Not surprising that the main reason why they're not doing very well is because they don't have a lot of goal scoring on this team. But in terms of the all-time meaning, 13-5 and 14 in favor of Vancouver, so Vancouver does have a slight advantage, and there's no doubt that they're going to be heavy favorites coming into this game as well. Now, moving on, we got Colorado versus St. Louis City. So Colorado coming off of a much needed win in the Rocky Mountain Cup. I mean, they needed that one just as desperate as RSL has. In fact, I would have said that Rocky Mountain Cup was a desperation derby because both of these teams were not doing very well and they desperately needed a win to get themselves back on track. And in some way, the Rapids kind of are doing that with a 5-4-5 record against the St. Louis side that, yeah, I mean, it's been a brutal stretch of run of form that the St. Louis tie has gone. They've gone 9 games without a win, 10 in all competition, and that include the last game against Minnesota. I mean, it's one way to lose in the U.S. Open Cup, but to give up 2 late goals, especially those 2 late goals are against a player that you used to own, that is absolutely brutal for St. Louis City fans to endure. And pain has been kind of what this fan base has kind of endured this season. It's just been a disastrous season for all of Mount Roadside, and it doesn't help the fact that now they have to play in altitude in this one against a Rapids team that, again, they feel like that Rocky Mountain Cup win might have been a turning point of coming back from their own bad run of form that they've been enduring. But in terms of head-to-head, 2-2-1 in favor of the Colorado Rapids, and we'll see whether or not if they can do so, especially against a St. Louis side that, when you look at St. Louis, it's hard to believe that if you just not include when they won the first 5 games of the season, this team have not been good historically on the road. This team has really struggled on the road. Last season was a big part of it. This season is the same thing as well. I don't think they actually no, they have won one road game this season, but it was against the team that is currently winless in the LA Galaxy. So yeah, overall it's just been miserable season for St. Louis, and there's no, it's hard to turn things around when you have to now go into altitude and play against a team that have been pretty good at home this season, and a big part why they're very good at home is because they play now altitude. Teams get tired out in altitude, and especially when you have a midweek game coming out of it, playing altitude, that just makes it even worse than if you have a full week to prepare for. Now, moving on into the last game of the Saturday action, we got the San Jose Earthquakes versus the Houston Dynamo. So the Quakes 5-3-6, and no doubt the Quakes actually have been in a really good run of form lately. They actually now have gone 6 games without a loss, and on a 6 game unbeaten run if you include it the win that they had against the Portland Timbers, against a Houston side that seems like they have also revitalized. Although that midweek game against Austin was one that Ben Olsen would not want to talk about. I mean, that was not a great performance in a Dynamo perspective, even if they maybe rest some of their players in that one. But they have a 4-4-6 record. Head-to-head meeting 17-3-8 in favor of the Houston Dynamo. The Dynamo has actually done very well against the Quakes, and at times have kind of had ownage on the Quakes, especially when they're playing at home. The Quakes have always tends to struggle when they play on the road against Houston. At home, it's been kind of a mixed bag. But knowing the fact that the Quakes have been playing relatively well, and also the fact that Houston playing well as well, this should be a very interesting matchup. I mean, it's between two teams that seems like they've been on a good form that is kind of very under the radar. Well, I don't think that a lot of people have talked about how both of these teams have been on a recently good run of form. So yeah, we'll see whether or not if one of these teams can continue that good run of form out of this game. Now, moving on into the last two games, the Sunday game that is that we're going to talk about. We're going to start with NYCFC versus the Chicago Fire. So this game starts at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific. I'm assuming this game is going to be well, actually, yeah, this game is probably going to be at Yankee Stadium because I know the Mets is playing this weekend against the Dodgers, so they have to play at Yankee Stadium in terms of this game. But yeah, NYCFC have a 6-3-5 record. Chicago have a 5-4-4 record, and all of a sudden, Chicago looks like started to rebound to form as they've won a couple of road game and even winning a home game as well. But in terms of all-time meeting, 11-8-3 in favor of NYCFC. Chicago has had their struggle against NYCFC this season. We'll see whether that can come to an end, especially against an NYCFC team that this team is starting to become a little hard to predict because at times you can see that this team could be good, and then at times this team can look absolutely horrendous as well. There's just no in between for Pascal Janssen's side, so we'll see what kind of NYCFC side will show up in this game against Chicago. And then last but not least, the Sunday night soccer game, we got Atlanta versus FC Cincinnati. So something tells me that in the beginning of the season, when they created this Sunday night soccer schedule, they were really hoping that this was a battle between two of the top team in the Eastern Conference. And while one team is definitely right up there with FC Cincinnati with a 9-2-3 record, that cannot be farther from the truth for Atlanta United. I mean, it's been you talk about the most disappointing team this season. It's got to be Atlanta United. I mean, you could maybe say the Galaxy could be the case, but I would say that the Galaxy, part of the disappointment that hey is not because of the winless run, but it's just that they've been dealt with so much injuries and also paying the cup taxes. Atlanta doesn't really have an excuse in that. I mean, the 50 million attack has not produced whatsoever. The defense has just been an absolute nightmare as well. And add all to that, they have a 2-5-7 record, and they've been winless for a while now. And there's a chance that that winless run might not come to an end against a Cincinnati team that this season they've been playing very well on the road. Only lost one time this season on the road. Now, in terms of head-to-head meeting, 5-6-4, slightly in favor of Atlanta United. And again, when they created this game, they were really hoping that this was going to be a marquee matchup, and there could still be a case that it could be if you look at the talent wise. Both of these teams have really good talent, but it's unfortunate that one of the team kind of live up to the talent wise in terms of producing resort that is Cincinnati, and the other team just have not done that exactly. I mean, it's been an underachieving with a capital U for Atlanta in terms of how this season has gone, and it doesn't feel like there's any end the sight, especially against a Cincinnati side that, like I said, they're a very good road team this season, and they're definitely licking their chops that they could get another big wing against an Atlanta team that is just sputtering right now. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for my preview of all of the games for match week number 14/15. Again, I don't remember exactly which match week this is. There's just been so many games. I'm starting to lose track of how what's the number of match week that we're now into the 2025 MLS season. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button. As always, let me know in the comments below. What do you think is your prediction for all 15 of these games? And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.